Thanks, Jerry. So it's not just patient records that are being stolen. There's a lot of vulnerabilities with medical devices, and that's what this section is going to focus on. This article here came out earlier this year in January, and basically the issue is there's a lot of medical devices, and a lot of those are implantable medical devices that have wireless capabilities. The problem with this is a lot of these devices are small in nature, like a pacemaker or an ICD, which we'll go over later. And because they're small, they don't have a lot of memory or power, they often don't have security features built into them. And because it is risky to remove an implantable device, then there has to be a mechanism to be able to update it remotely or wirelessly. So that's part of the challenge with some of these devices. As an example, with the Abbott pacemakers, there were almost 500,000 of these that had a vulnerability, and the vulnerability allowed someone to remotely connect to the pacemaker and alter the rhythm and alter its functionality. And if you think about it, the fix is a firmware fix, but the firmware fix is applied wirelessly to an unsecure pacemaker. If someone can wirelessly apply a firmware fix to an implantable pacemaker, then that same mechanism could be used to plant malicious software instead of the firmware. And I don't know how many of you follow the news or watch 60 Minutes, but there was an interview with former Vice President Dick Cheney on 60 Minutes, where he has had many heart problems over his lifespan, and he has an implantable or a pacemaker implanted. And they were so concerned about terrorist attacks leveraging some of the vulnerabilities in the pacemaker that they disabled the wireless functionality of the pacemaker for him. There was even a Homeland episode that was very true to heart, I guess no pun intended, that was based on the exact scenario. And in that interview, if you want to go look at it later, Cheney mentions that Homeland episode as well. This is from Wikipedia, and this is a former hacker, Barnaby Jack, and he's done a lot of research with pacemakers, implantable devices, as well as drug infusion pumps, which we'll go over here in a second, because those are vulnerable as well. And a lot of his, as you can read right there, his research showed that if you could get within 50 feet of somebody with a pacemaker, he was able to remotely send an electric shock. And this was his research. So imagine if you have an implantable pacemaker and someone is within 50 feet, which is not too close, especially if you're a public figure, then they could shock your heart and maybe cause you to die or something along those lines. This same guy also did some research with insulin pumps and was able to hack into them from up to 300 feet away. And the exploit he accomplished was to increase the flow rate of insulin, which would put people into the hypoglycemic shock or ketoacidosis. Another medical device that's been compromised are drug infusion pumps. These are devices that are connected to a patient that has maybe a morphine drip. And they control the flow of morphine. As an example, it could be a different type of drug. These devices have wireless connections as well as wired connections, and they have been exploited wirelessly where people have been able to plant malicious software on the drug infusion pump and increase the flow rate of something like morphine, for instance, so it's flowing at full capacity, and you could cause someone to OD on morphine as an example. And there's been a lot of controversy about these devices and how hackable they are. Other devices that are hackable or vulnerable. There's a whole slew of them. This is not the entire list. MRI systems have been compromised in the past, so have PACs, so have pacemakers, as we discussed. Another device is an ICD. It's an implantable cardioverter defibrillator. Basically, if your heart stops, it administers a shock just like a normal defibrillator does to restart your heart. A lot of pacemakers are also ICDs, but some of them are separate products, and those have also been subject to vulnerabilities. We talked about drug infusion pumps. Other devices that are subject to vulnerabilities and hacking are ID/AST devices. Those devices, an ID/AST device is a medical device that if you have a infection and the doctor takes a sample of your blood, they run it through this device. The device analyzes your blood and tells you what type of bacteria infection you have, and then recommends, which is the AST part, an antibiotic that will work best with that infection. So these devices, they're pretty much at every hospital and clinic, and there's been vulnerabilities with many manufacturers of these devices as well. As an example of something you could do with a device like this, the same type of device is not only used in hospitals and clinics, it's also used in industrial settings or industry, where, for instance, if you're testing hamburger for E. coli, the same kind of device could do the testing of the hamburger, and the hamburger would be the sample. But if you were able to hack into these devices, which are fairly easy to do, and contaminate the hamburger supply chain with E. coli or salmonella, and then have these devices not test positive for salmonella or E. coli, and you can release hamburger to the wild with those infections, you could kill a lot of people. Another medical device that has been compromised are the X-ray machines. In this part right here, since we do penetration testing, we do a lot of penetration testing against healthcare providers, hospitals, and clinics. So this next few slides here are the results of one of our penetration tests against a hospital in the Pacific Northwest. This slide may not mean too much, but basically what this is, and this was an on-site penetration test, this is us capturing what's called the four-way handshake for a wireless communication. So basically what we do, and this is the same tactics an adversary would use, is we will kick off legitimate devices off of a internal access point and force them to re-authenticate. And then once they re-authenticate, we grab the exchange of the passphrase or the pre-shared key. Then using some tools, we can crack that passphrase. And then once we know the passphrase, we can connect to the wireless network that was supposedly encrypted and protected. So in that hospital, we were able to grab the four-way handshake. And I just wanted to show you one of these tools. There's many tools out there. This is just a simple tool called CeWL. It's really cool, but it's CEWL. So what it does, it parses a website. You just point it at a website. It parses the website and comes up with a dictionary of keywords based off of everything on that website. In a lot of organizations, they will use some sort of word related to their organization or to their industry or to their website as their passphrase. And this is with the Alpine security website. This is not the real hospital, obviously. But this slide here is the results of us cracking that passphrase from the hospital. On the bottom, it took us, as you can see right here, it took us 35 minutes roughly to crack the passphrase. The passphrase was actually the organization's name with a capital letter at the beginning, and then I think they had 1, 2, 3 exclamation point at the end. So we were able to use CeWL to create a baseline dictionary, and then another tool to add some special characters at the end to crack the password. And once we cracked this password, it gave us access to their internal medical devices, so the devices like the drug infusion pumps, and all the devices on their hospital network. And most hospital beds today have between 5 and 10 networked devices per bed, per patient. So imagine, what damage somebody could do if they really wanted to. In this particular engagement, our rules of engagement prohibited us from, attacking medical devices on a patient's hospital bed, and we wouldn't have done that anyway. And all these tactics I'm going over right now are the on-site portion of the penetration testing. This other part right here is social engineering, which is part of the on-site portion. This is for that same hospital, actually. And for this tactic, we pretended we were an IT support technician, and our storyline was that the medical assistant's computer was infected with malware that was sending spam to other people in the hospital and outside of the hospital, so we needed to look at her computer. We had a body cam on, and this is just a picture from the body cam of the shred bin beneath the person's desk. So it's electronically, PHI can be stolen, but we can also steal it this way as well. This is just a picture of a zoomed in picture of one of the records we were able to glean. And this is the actual patient record. You could see their PO box and their patient name and all that stuff. And you could also find out their insurance information. And this is all from the body cam we had. This is just another picture from the body cam we wore. Again, we're like in an active hospital. This is what's called a LAN Turtle. And we also planted a Keylogger. These are two devices that we typically plant on an environment if we have physical access, which with hospitals and healthcare providers, most of them are open 24 hours, a lot of them, especially hospitals, so it's kind of hard to lock them down from these kind of attacks. And we'll go over some ways you can lock that down later on. So this is just another picture from that body cam. This is it was a pen you put in your pocket that has a camera on it with a USB stick. This is from behind the desk. So this is the actual waiting area out here where there's patients waiting. Again, we pretended like we're IT support, and we got access to this physical computer here. One of the devices we planted was the LAN Turtle, as I mentioned. The LAN Turtle is a USB device, and what it does is you unplug the Ethernet connection from the computer, plug the Ethernet connection into the LAN Turtle, and then plug the LAN Turtle into the USB port of the computer. So the LAN Turtle is basically a small computer that is attached via USB to the victim's computer. And down here, it might be hard to see. You can look this device up. You can buy it on hack5.com. What this device does, it will create a tunnel out of the organization you planted on to your machine as the attacker, out through the firewall. And most organizations, they allow pretty much everything outbound through their firewall, but they block stuff coming in. So if I can plant a device like this, that I can get a shell on that computer, which means I can remotely control that computer, or I can remotely control this device and scan other computers very easily. The other device we planted is a Keylogger. This is my favorite device because it's foolproof. No matter who does the social engineering engagement, if you plant this device, it's going to work. And it is not detectable. The LAN Turtle is detectable. This device is not detectable unless you physically inspect the computer. So the Keylogger, in this one here, it just looks just like this picture right here. You can buy it on Amazon for 50 bucks for this one. It holds, this is 8 meg, it holds 4,000 pages of text, which is a lot. So you plant this device, you just get access to the computer, unplug the USB keyboard, plug it into the Keylogger, and then plug the Keylogger back into the USB port. And the beauty about this device and why I like it is because most users, if they notice this thing plugged in, they probably wouldn't think it was malicious. They would just assume it's some sort of adapter. And this one right here does not do wireless, so you have to go back later on and retrieve it. But there are keyloggers that you plug in that wirelessly will connect to an access point and log the keystrokes to whatever server you want. So you don't even have to go back and pick the device up. This next slide here is just a picture of what type of data you get back from the keylogger. You can see somebody press Control-Alt-Delete here. This is their password. Then they entered a name, and then looks like these pound signs were put in there intentionally to hide the real identities of people. The birth date here looks like a social security number, and then over here looks like a city. You can see they put Tukwila, which is up by Seattle. You can see they put backspaces because they mistyped. Then you have Aetna, the insurance provider, and the insurance number there as an example. So very easy to pull these things off.